had a strong disagreement about this.
I wonder why.
And she's like, there's no provenance, right? Just because it was in the Sideshow Museum, that's not provenance. You have to be able to. And I said, I know what provenance is. So I go to the auction and I top out it. Abraham Lincoln.
Here we go.
I am a Lincoln collector.
Like the car or the guy?
No, the guy.
Oh.
Over many years, I have bought things associated with Abraham Lincoln at auction. I have a blood-soaked piece of the pillowcase that he died on.
Come on.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Framed?
Yeah, framed. I bought it at Sotheby's.
It's still got his blood on it.
Soaked with blood. I have an 11.5-inch strip of the wallpaper from the room that he died in at the Peterson Guest House. I have a swatch of Mrs. Lincoln's dress that she wore to his funeral.
What's a swatch?
Just a scrap of her black dress. I have a piece of the wood that made the gallows that the conspirators were hung from.
That's a crazy story, by the way.
I buy all this stuff at auction, like serious auctions, and it's all about provenance. You know, provenance is you have to be able to document from Lincoln himself how it got to you.
Mm.
So the blood-soaked pillowcase piece, Mr. Peterson, who owned the house that he died in, took the pillowcase and cut it into pieces with his scissors. And he gave the doctor who fished the bullet out of Lincoln's brain the piece. He gave it to his daughter, who married the governor of Indiana. And then it passed down through their family until they sold it at Sotheby's, and I bought it. Right?
Whoa.
So that's provenance. So you can prove that it is what it says it is. So, summer of 2009. I have my boys for the summer. I had 2 sons at the time. Well, I had more than just, I had 3 sons and a daughter, but my 2 from my oldest, from my first marriage.
You're on your second marriage.
Yeah, I'm on my second marriage at that point. So we went to Baltimore. The whole family went to Baltimore because they had this thing called the Sideshow Museum. And it was a museum of circus freak shows from the 1800s, like stuff that had been in these circus sideshows. They had like some 9-foot-tall woman. She's mummified. The Amazon, they called her. They had a jackalope, you know, stuff like, most of it's funny, just silly stuff. But they have the shadow box hanging on the wall. And there's a dried out turd in it. And it says it's Abraham Lincoln's final turd.
Come on.
So it says on the card, it said when he arrived at Ford's Theater, he had to drop a deuce. And so before he got seated, he went to the men's room and he dropped a deuce in the chamber pot. And then he went back to watch the play and he got shot.
And someone fished it out?
Somebody had the presence of mind to fish it out. And they saved it.
The presence of mind or the sickness?
Well, there are a lot of Lincoln collectors out there. It's very competitive. So
technically, the last shit he takes is in the bed after he dies.
Yeah, well, technically, you're right. Technically, yes, you're right. So, unless he got it all out the first time.
All right,
so,
thank you.
So, this place was run down, and it was dirty, and the owner had a cat. The place smelled of cat. And I see an article in the Washington Post about 6 months later saying it's going out of business, and they're going to auction everything off. So I told my wife, I'm buying that turd. She's like, oh, no, you're not. I said, oh, yes, I am. I'm buying that turd.
John, what does a 144-year-old turd look like?
It was all dried out, and there was a kernel of rice sticking out of it. And
how do you preserve that?
He had chicken and rice for his last meal. That was his last meal.
All
at the
right,
White
I
House.
could plant the rice in there if I wanted to.
Well,
how do you preserve that?
It was just air dried. They just stuck it in a shadow box. It was pinned to the shadow box.
I heard that, but that's all they did?
Yeah, it dries out. It doesn't like go moldy or anything. So my wife and I actually had a strong disagreement about this.
I wonder why.
She's like, there's no provenance, right? Just because it was in the Sideshow Museum, that's not provenance. You have to be able to. And I said, I know what provenance is. So I go to the auction and I top out at $1,200. I can't go over $1,200 for this thing. It ends up going for $5,000.
Oh my God.
So the Washington Post reporter's there. And he's like, there was this turd and it went for $5,000. Spirited bidding, they said. So the guy that ended up buying it sends it to some company for a DNA sample. And what they found was it had like microscopic bits of Necco wafer in it. You know what a Necco wafer is?
Do I look like I know what Necco wafer is, John?
It's the most disgusting candy that's ever been created. It's from Pittsburgh.
Well, that sounds about right.
And they're all pastel colors.
Yeah.
They're disgusting. They're little wafers, little round circles. They look like buttons. But Necco wafers weren't invented until 1880.
Oh, it wasn't his shit.
It wasn't his. It was just some random guy's turd that somebody paid $5,000 for. I thanked my lucky stars that I didn't get it.
That's called Darwinism to whoever spent $5,000 on anyone's shit.
Right.
But that's... Can you imagine like the Washington Post reporters like Joby work? So why'd you buy this shit?
Oh my God. I would have called him. Like, Joby, we can't be bidding against each other.
Oh my God. How far back do you go with Joby?
07?
Was he calling you about that?
Mm-hmm. He was one of the first guys to interview me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he mentioned it last time he was in here.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, I like Joey. He's a good
solid reporter.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
He's so unafraid to be the sober voice in the room and tell people shit they don't want to hear.
That's right.
And also sometimes like he speaks openly about like, look, you're still working with sources that got their motives, right? And so sometimes you're going to get backed information that turns out to give exactly what they want to get out there.
That's exactly right.
And a lot of journalists, because it's just a reality of that profession. It's a reality of even what I do here. I don't know every fucking person that comes in here and what they're trying to do.
And this is one of the reasons why I respect Joby work so much. He's not the kind of journalist who's going to just take a CIA press release and gist it. He has sources, human sources, that he can use to either confirm or deny information.
Yeah, I love talking with him. I was a fan of him before I ever brought him in here because I read his books. His books are incredible.
Oh, his books are fantastic. The host bombing? Oh, man.
Yeah, you got to call him and ask him what he's working on right now. I'm not allowed to tell you.
Okay.
But I think we were talking off camera earlier about something else, and I think it'd be something you would be very interested in.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, it's really cool stuff. Small world.
Yeah.
But so how did you get into being a Lincoln collector? Like, were you just obsessed with the guy when you were a kid?
Yeah. Yeah. The greatest president in American history, as far as I'm concerned.
He's definitely top three.
The kind of person that we should want to be like. The only thing I ever got outbid on that I really kick myself over, there was a gigantic Lincoln auction at Heritage Auctions in Dallas back in 2009. And I was outbid on the original key to his tomb. I couldn't get that. That went for big bucks.
What kind of bucks we talking?
Went for close to 10 grand. I think I went up to like 3,600, 3,800. And my wife is like, it's a freaking key.
Yeah.
It's just a key.
Yeah, you could buy like a lot of Givenchy with that.
Yeah.
Something. Yeah, so do you have like a Lincoln room?
No, I have it framed and then I put it up on the wall. I've got a ballot from Ohio from the 1860 election that has Lincoln on the ballot.
That's a lot higher on my list than shit, but you know. God damn it, John. Did you ever see that documentary? It just makes, when you were saying provenance, it makes me think about it because I've never asked anyone about this. I just watched it. But you ever see the documentary, The Lost Leonardo?
Yes. And I don't think that's a Leonardo.
Okay. So
I think Mohammed bin Salman got ripped off.
I think he might have too.
$500 million.
Just for context for people, there was a piece down in a New Orleans auction. Mm-hmm. This is, I don't know, maybe a decade ago, something like that.
Yeah.
What's that?
It's Salvator Mundi.
Yeah, the Salvator Mundi. And actually, Alessi, can you pull it up? Salvator Mundi, Mundi, and you'll be able to see the picture. And so there's apparently these guys, like this is a real job that exists, where
there it is.
They just go to auctions. We have it up on the screen right now. They just go to auctions all over the world, wherever it is, and they try to find cracks, right? Where something slipped through the cracks.
Oh my God, I would love to do that.
It's such a cool job. And so these guys out of New York, I forget their name, they two of them, they went down to this show in New Orleans and they see this picture and they didn't go like, oh, that's a Leonardo. They just went, something about this is crazy, because we see it on the screen. If we could pull it up one more time or less. This is it remastered. I'll explain the context as to how that happened. But when they found it, it was like torn apart. You kind of had, you kind of had to like sift through it to see what was there. And apparently there's all kinds of ways things can be restored. So
wow,
that's perfect, Les. We got it. So
I see. Down in the bottom left, it's all messed up.
yes, yeah. See that? Actually, yeah. See the example on the far left? Up one, Les?
Yeah.
Right there. So people can see that. Wow. This is what I believe what it initially looked like. But you can see there, from an art perspective, you look at that and you go, there is something there.
Yeah.
That looks interesting. It was selling for like, I don't know, fucking $1,000 or maybe less. And these guys are like, all right.
Yeah, you can get an old master painting, 17th century, 16th century for $1,000, $1,500.
Especially if they don't know who painted
exactly.
it. Right.
School of or circle of, so-and-so.
Yeah, so this was really fascinating for me to learn about, but they bring it back to New York and there's a whole underground, system of experts who can determine down to the paint stroke.
Yes.
With high accuracy if something's attributable to someone. So they take it to this woman who, I forget her name, but her husband, he had passed away. He was like the most famous art something or other. I'll fuck up what the official title was, but he was an expert on this stuff, and she was an expert on it because of him. So she starts looking through it, and I forget what her logic was, but suddenly it like came upon her. She's like, holy shit, this is a Leonardo. So they commission her to retouch it up. So it goes from the old one to the new one that we showed like a few minutes ago, and actually looks real. And they started marketing it as a Leonardo. And very quickly there was a famous reporter, I forget his name, from the New York Times, who was instantly like, no, fuck this, that's not a Leonardo. And people started fighting over it. But long story short, skipping all the middle parts along the way, it ends up going to a Sotheby's auction in New York City, where there is the auctioneers up there, a whole crowd, and then there's a silent like crew of dudes on the phone.
Yes.
Who are all like American New York attorneys or something.
They're taking the bids by proxy.
And you don't know who it is. Uh-huh. And suddenly the bid goes up to like $450 million or something.
Right.
And they're like, winner. So it's the most expensive piece ever sold. And it floats up later that it is most likely MBS who bought it. And now they're like certain that he bought it.
Oh, yeah.
And there are many people who are still like, yo, that's not a Leonardo. Maybe they were saying maybe it could have been a student of his, which isn't worth nearly as much.
Right.
But the Louvre wanted to put the painting on display in the Leonardo exhibit because there's like 15 or 16 known Leonardos.
Yes.
And there was supposedly this, they weren't admitting it was MBS they were talking with, but there was this underground conversation. Oh, we're going to get it. We're going to get it. We're going to get it. And then eventually they didn't, because MBS wanted it put next to the Mona Lisa so that symbolically people would assume it had the same level of like importance as the Mona Lisa.
He was thinking. Yeah.
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 So it's like this whole thing, but the provenance is what they didn't have. They didn't know who it passed from and all that.
Now,
so
how the heck does it get to New Orleans? There was just a two-part HBO series, not a series, a two-part HBO documentary on Leonardo that goes through his entire life. And he traveled a decent bit for, the late 16th century. But when I say travel, I mean between Rome, Milan, Venice, Florence, Naples. That was pretty much it. And pretty much all of his work stayed there and in France. And that's it. How in the heck did that end up in New Orleans?
I mean, it's been a lot of years. Things can happen. The world has certainly changed. I could see it. It gets really weird. And that one, I tend to believe it's not a Leonardo.
I think
it's just I understand where that lady was coming from, because part of it could be a little bit of confirmation bias because she's looked at so much crazy art her whole career. And, finding a Leonardo is like finding a fucking golden Charizard.
Yeah.
Like, you're not finding that thing.
Yeah, it's what everybody fantasizes about in that line. Yeah.
He was something else, though. You ever read Isaacson's biography of him?
No.
So good.
Really?
Oh, he was a god. I mean, he was a true polymath who just...
Yeah, he was.
He was a rebel, but he could do everything.
Did you know that he only wrote backwards?
Yes.
I did not know that until I
Yeah.
saw this documentary.
Yeah, actually, I haven't read the biography in a while.
He was obsessed with the idea of people stealing his communications.
Yes.
And so he only wrote backwards.
Yeah, they had that in the Da Vinci Code, where
Right,
part of the
that's
code that they're
true.
uncovering.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Brown wrote that in the book, where it's like you had to hold it up to a mirror
Right.
to see.
Yeah.
It's fucking crazy. Like, bro,
It's like James Madison. James Madison could write Greek with his right hand and Latin with his left hand at the same time.
what is that?
I know. What is that? It's some kind of glitch in your brain.
Do you think that because you've been around some crazy people in your life, you think
Yeah.
some people are literally just born physically different and we just can't see it?
Yeah, I do. I do. Yeah. Yeah. Crazy.
I think that's the only way you explain like an Elon Musk.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.